social, music, talk. With me today is Dave Williams, who has performed in so many different markets on radio, but we're going to focus on Sacramento because that's kind of where it all started for you, right, Dave?
Yeah, it's my hometown. So I was born there and I grew up there and actually spent the first 49 years of my life there.
Mm-hmm. So your actual first station, wasn't that in Yuba City?
Yeah, my first on-air job. That's
Mm-hmm.
the way it used to work, Alex. As you remember, it was like, if you're going to get into radio, you start off in a college station or a very small market. And then when you're ready to graduate, you get a job at a medium-sized city. I do think that a lot of people miss an awful lot of learning and development. It would be like taking a really good baseball player out of high school and putting him right in the big leagues. That occasionally happens, actually, but there's so much nuance to learning the art of performing radio and to learning programming and strategies and approaches and all that stuff. And you have to learn that by screwing up, which we all did in minor markets. So anyway, yeah, that's the way.
So
That's the
you
way it
came
used to
into
work.
radio in 69, 70 in the era when society was completely changing and
Yeah,
radio was right there changing with it.
right. Yeah, society was changing big time. I'm 72. I was born in 1951. My parents grew up in the 30s and 40s. Well, society was nothing like it is now. And even when I was a child, my mother was listening to your hit parade and, the music of the 50s, a little bit of doo-wop, but mostly things like, Patty Page and that kind of thing. So when I got into radio, when I got interested in radio in the early 60s, well, music was changing big time. We had a lot of our rhythm and blues that had never really been part of the mainstream,
Mhm.
pop radio and so
Even
forth.
before Motown.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, along came surf bands, and then here come the Beatles and the whole English invasion and everything, and all of that developed on the back of a great deal of concern and I think dis I don't want to say disgust. A lot of young people of my time were very much worried about the way things were going. For one thing, we had the war in Vietnam.
Mhm,
I graduated in 1969 from high school. Uh,
mhm.
I know guys that went to that war and died and stayed there. I was 18 years old. I was facing the very real possibility of being sent 10,000 miles with a rifle into a rice paddy where I would die before I was old enough to fall in love,
Mhm.
before I was old enough to, have a vote for what was going on. So this was a big deal. It really was a big deal at the time, and it changed all of the culture musically. We got the San Francisco sound and all of that stuff. So I grew up in the middle of all that, and it was really exciting, and radio followed along and led the way in very exciting ways.
So talk about how KROY, where you started your top 40 medium market career, and then it blossomed into major markets.
Yeah,
At KROY, the format was, I guess, run by Johnny Hyde, called Music Power.
right.
It was a little bit different than Boss Radio. Explain the difference between Boss Radio, which was pretty popular in the mid 60s through late 60s, versus KROY.
KROY was a radio station that had its roots a little bit earlier than what you're talking about. Boss Radio, which
Mhm.
was the Bill Drake format that became so big in San Francisco and Los Angeles and Boston and other cities. The main difference was that because KROY started, it was from a little bit earlier in the popular music scene. Uh, we considered ourselves a personality station. The other stations just considered themselves music stations.
Mm.
And that was the mantra for them, was more music, more music, less talk. I felt really, really lucky because I was starting off in radio the way I listened to it, the way I learned it as a child. The disc jockeys. Look, I like music, but all the stations play essentially the same songs.
Mhm.
It's like, but it was the disc jockeys that made the difference. They were entertaining. They were exciting. They were funny. And that's all I wanted to do. It's all I ever wanted to do. And so I managed to work my way into KROY, which was the station I grew up listening to back in the days of the late 60s into the 70s. They
Mhm.
were there on Arden Way. And they had that window that looked in from the sidewalk to where
I
the disc
remember that.
jockey was working. And I used to go out there, when I was in high school, go out there with my friends, and we'd stand out there for a couple of hours, just watch the disc jockey work, and got the radio turned up. And then lo and behold, I mean, it wasn't that long after I graduated, I was on the other side of that window. I was sitting there with the controls and the microphone and the records, and it was just an absolute dream come true. And I can't say enough about my time at KROY. It, with the possible exception of personal matters like marriage and childbirth, it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
Now, did you have freedom? What type of freedom did you have at KROY?
Well, we had the freedom of choosing every other record. The records that we didn't choose were the current hits. They came up in various rotations depending upon how popular they were, how well they were selling, how much they were requested, and so forth. So that would be a stack of the top 10 were in a stack of 10 records. They were literally a stack of records. Next to that was another stack of records with little blue labels instead of red ones. And those were, the bubbling under kind of hits. And those didn't play as frequently as the red ones. But at KROY, what Johnny Hyde had established, as far as I know, had never been done anywhere. And I'm not sure that it ever has been since. And he had every other song was an older song, a
Okay.
rebound, we called them
Mhm.
rebounds. And we had the freedom to choose those within some limits, and the limits were if you were working a night shift, uh, then you were allowed to play some album cuts, some
Okay.
heavier stuff, some longer cuts,
Mhm.
and because
Were there restrictions on music at all? Like say, with you're allowed to pick these certain songs, but did you have to keep in mind a certain flow of the music?
oh, absolutely, that's part of the craft that I was talking about. Of course, that's not necessary today because today, the people that play music, it's just all programmed into the computer and they play what comes up. But we did have choices. Now, we did have restrictions too. It was like I couldn't just grab a Steely Dan album and play any old cut off of that I wanted.
Mm.
I had to play the approved ones.
Mhm.
So there was that limitation. But essentially, that was it. The fact of the matter is most of us learned very quickly that we weren't there to play records for ourselves. We do that at home. uh,
Mhm.
so you learn, you get to know your audience, and you get to follow the rules, and next thing you know, you're sitting in a number one radio station, and you're 18 years old.
That's right. KROY was number one in Sacramento, 12 plus, 1968 through 1973, and you were there most of those years.
And the KROY only had 1,000 watts of power during the day, 250 at night.
Mm.
Now, we had a tremendous engineer named Don Trafton. He did more with that low power and rather uh, the shaky quality of the signal. He did as much with it as the engineers at KFRC and KHJ. He made it he made it loud, louder than it should have been. Although at night you were still lucky to get into Citrus Heights at all.
Mm.
But
Yeah. It
yeah, it
didn't,
was
didn't cover the entire metro area.
no.
Yeah.
Mm. The metro pretty well. It
Mm.
covered the metro, but that's about it. Well,
Now let's talk about KNDE because that was a competitor to
yeah,
KROY, and you wound up at KNDE as a program director, and that was like 1974, 1975. So talk
yeah,
about that.
yeah. KNDE, KNDE. came along about 1972, I believe. And I was sitting there at KROY, and we were playing the hits, and we were number one. And I was doing a morning show by then. And oh yeah, we just thought those guys at KNDE were just nuts. You know, they didn't know what they were doing. And they were actually staffed and programmed by some very, very bright people. That station changed quite a bit over the next couple of years. They'd been beaten down a little bit, and the ownership decided, okay, the way we're doing this, they were kind of like, I want to make the comparison to KZAP at the time. KZAP was an all album oriented, total free form. You know, you never knew what the disc jockeys were going to say or what they were going to play. There was like little to no format at all. And there was a big audience for that. So anyway, that's what KNDE was trying to do on AM. It just didn't really work out. So they finally changed back over to Top 40 and decided to take KROY on head to head. And soon after that, I returned from Los Angeles and started working the afternoon shift there because KROY didn't have anything available for me.
You were at K-Earth in Los Angeles, right? They were playing oldies at the time?
Yeah. Okay. Really old oldies, 50s stuff. And I would, it didn't do anything for me. But so at KNDE, I became program director rather soon after I started there doing the afternoon show. And we made some things happen, and we managed to beat KROY for the first time in years. Yeah.
You know what strikes me is that period when you were there, and I was just a kid at the time. I was 12 years old in 1974. But that summer, KNDE had its van at the California State Fair at Cal Expo, and Gene Lane was, I was watching him do his show, and that's what but besides Casey Kasem, that's what made me want to get into radio, was watching him at the fair.
Yeah. What a goofball he is. I talked to him not that long ago, about 6 months ago or so, and he's still out there. He's still the space cowboy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
he does Elvis impersonations.
Yeah. He made a good living at it for years. He doesn't look anything like Elvis, although he puts on the hair and all that and the suit and everything. But we had some wonderful people working at KROY. We had some really good jocks working at KNDE too. It's just that station just couldn't hold its head up long enough to become entrenched in the market, because
so did KROY just become ingrained in people's minds as the top 40 station in Sacramento?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, oh yeah, it was. Like I said, it became generational.
Dave, we've got so many more radio stories to tell at some point, but that's all we have time for today. And I want to talk with you about your talk radio career as well in our next interview.
Happy to do that, and talk with you whenever you like, Alex. This is really fun.
Great. Awesome. All right. And I've watched some of your videos, and I think you do a great job interviewing people.
After so many years doing news and talk, 40 some years of it, I still feel like that's really my weakness. I don't feel confident at all in asking questions or inserting a little twist in an opinion.
Well, I think, like Kitty O'Neill said, you have a way of being yourself, and that's a big part of I think why I like your interviews.
Thank you. Well, that's what I got from Top 40 Radio in the late 60s. Being yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And
I want to talk more about that, because I did Top 40 Radio in the 80s, and because they wanted me to be super high energy, like way more high energy than I really am.
Yeah.
I didn't really fit, so that's
I didn't either. And that's what we were doing at KNDE.
Yeah.
I was doing the afternoon show. Hey, talking like this, right? And that's not me. It wasn't working out for me. We did okay as a station, but I needed to relax a little bit.
All right, Dave, I'll let you relax for now, and let's talk again soon.
Anytime, Alex. I mean that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Social music.